Okay, morning everybody, and thank you for being here. This is, well, to talk about the problems we're having in the UK with getting hotels for Eastercon because of pandemic. My name is Alice Lawson. At the moment, we have Phil Dyson, Vanessa May, and Patrick McMurray, or Pat, and John Dodd will try and join us later, but he's actually busy running a convention in a hotel live. Woo! So we're going to run this by each person will introduce themselves and talk about what they've come across problem-wise. We'll take questions if you put the questions into the chat, and we'll take it from there, and that'll be after everybody's had a say. So kind of start with Phil.
Okay. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough this morning. My name's Phil Dyson. I'm chair of Reclamation, the 2022 Eastercon, which next year is going to be held at the Radisson Business Centre, Heathrow. Most of you know that place as the Park Inn. It's where we had the 2019 Eastercon, so I think most of you are familiar with said building. We've had quite a journey getting to where we are in terms of being in Heathrow. We started properly looking for venues in August 2019, pretty much just after the Dublin World Cup was when I first formally started doing this process. We've spoken to, I think it was 8 or 9 different venues before we ended up where we are. And there's a lot of problems we've had in being able to find a suitable space with which to hold an Eastercon. And there's I think 2 main things going on here. COVID is one of them, and I'll come to that in a minute. But there's another more long-term structural problem that we have venue-wise. So Eastercons are an awkward size for UK hotels. Most UK convention spaces are too small for what we are. Because we do lots of programs, because we have lots of stuff that we bolt on, you know, art shows, dealers, and so on and so forth, we need a lot of spaces and quite a lot of bigger spaces. And most hotels in the UK just don't have those kind of things. The much bigger spaces are far too big for an Eastercon. So you could say, well, what about, say, the XL or the SEC? They're far too big and too expensive, and we can't afford them. So our initial pool of places we can look at is already quite small. The second element to that is the increasing corporatization of UK hotels. So the number of people who actually talk to us and actually offer us a realistic deal such that we can actually run a convention is also quite small. So some of the bigger hotels have been taken over, are being taken over by big global corporates, such that they will not negotiate with us anymore. So one venue we spoke to, which has hosted at Eastercon a few years ago, was recently taken over by a large chain. The manager of said hotel said to us, "I would love to offer you the deal that we had with your previous Eastercon. I am not allowed to do so anymore. I'm really sorry." Which is incredibly frustrating both for him and for us. So that's one problem. The second thing is, so COVID really obviously really messed things up, with the result that it's made it even harder to negotiate with venues. One venue, for example, which would have been, we think, viable, they fired all their event management people, so that we couldn't talk to anybody and negotiate with them. All we got was a salesperson who said, "You have to pay £90,000 up front," which obviously we don't have. And that was it. There was no room for negotiation. There was nothing at all. It was like, pay up or go away. So obviously we had to go away. So I think those 2 things have made our lives very, very difficult. We eventually found a space in Brighton, thanks to John Dodd, actually, who sadly is unable to join us this morning. And that was fine, except then they said, well, look, we're doing this this big refurbishment project, and it's just been brought forward, and it means you'll only have a certain number of spaces left that you can work in, none of it, which was basically too small for us. And also, we don't really want an Eastercon in the middle of a building site. Plan B, the Heathrow option, thankfully. So that's kind of why we're there. So it's been a very, very long road, and it's been extremely stressful. But fingers crossed, we have a venue that we can run an in-person Eastercon in. So I think I'll leave it there for the moment. But that gives you a very quick overview of the journey we've been on over the past couple of years.
Thanks, Phil. And just a reminder, memberships are available.
Yes.
Now, I think we'll go to Vanessa next.
Hi, I'm Vanessa. I'm bidding for 2023. I was the chair for Concentric, which never happened. I was the chair for Confusion. I also worked on PASGON, which never actually happened, but where a lot of my hotel issues so trying to find hotels in different parts of the country, which we also tried to do for Concentric. So we wanted to go places that there weren't hotels, but what you find is there aren't venues, as Phil has said, big enough. But even if they have the function space, for PASGON, for instance, we found a great hotel with plenty of function space, but only had 102 bedrooms. So then and the problem there was there weren't enough surrounding hotels and surrounding things that would allow us to block book in them to be able to provide the rooms that we needed for the membership. That's another issue that you come up against, is you find hotels with plenty of function space, but not enough bedrooms. And then you need to try and figure out where you're going to put your membership, because everybody wants to stay in the convention hotel. And when you say, well, there's only 100 rooms in the convention hotel, the scrum for getting rooms is difficult. So and then there's the problem of finding a hotel that has enough around it, so it's not out in the middle of a motorway. Enough events and things to go and do when you're not actually in the hotel and participating in events and panels. So I found several hotels that looked really nice up in Norfolk. They didn't have so they were basically not enough bedrooms. They had function space, but they were set out in the middle of the wilderness, more or less. Oh, look, we're in this nice nature reserve. Okay, well, that's not actually what I need, because nobody wants to go out and put a campfire up and cook their breakfast. So that's one of the problems I had with finding hotels, was finding one that had enough function space, along with enough bedroom space, and places to eat and do things around the hotel. So I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. So I think what I'm hearing there is the pandemic's really only exacerbated a standing.
Yeah.
Well, plus what they have done is they've raised. So now they've raised the rates.
Introduce myself before we move on to more questions.
No, we're not asking questions yet, Pat.
All right.
Haven't forgotten you, sweetie, honest. Did you finish, Vanessa?
Yeah.
Pat.
Okay, my name is Pat McMurray. I'm chair of a bid for 2024, and I ran Mancuniacon in 2016, and I've been involved with a bunch of other conventions. I've been involved in hotel searches 3 or 4 times, and I won't give you a third iteration on how difficult it is, because of course it's difficult. But I think what makes it difficult is interesting. I found that effectively there seem to be 2 sorts of problems, one of which is what I think of as the real ale bar problem. The first time you say to the hotel, oh, we'd like to have a real ale bar, and they'll often, some hotels say, great, we do this all the time. Some hotels say, absolutely not, under no circumstances. Some will say, we'll cooperate. So that's a filter. But the filter is basically imposed by our membership. Our membership is saying, no real ale bar, we don't really want to go. Exceptions, but we won't get into that. And then the other thing are things about rates and costs. If you're willing to pay enough, it's trivial to find a nice site pretty much anywhere in the country. But you suddenly find that you're faced with having to £200 membership rates and £150 a night. And again, that's another filter put in. So I think there are a lot of sites, but it's trying to find suitable sites that makes it a big challenge. So there we are, done.
I mean, from my personal experience, I think all of you are saying similar things, but the problem that we had for NovaCon, which is not as big as Eastercon, but found a lovely hotel. Eventually, they managed to get us real ale, all the rest of it. However, they just didn't have the staff. It was a nice convention, it was fun, but problems with people getting food, the bars closing early, lack of staff, which is down to having to lay people off, or hotel staff finding other jobs and deciding not to come back into the business. It's all a bit of a hodgepodge at the moment. We've got one, our first question I think we'll take from Shana. Does the Brighton Hotel being refurbished mean it might be a decent venue for a future Eastercon?
Yeah, I think it would. And that's something to bear in mind in future years. It's still got issues around access. They've fixed some of the problems, but the physical geography of the spaces is such that they'd have to completely rebuild everything. I don't know what it's going to look like after they've rebuilt stuff. So, but potentially, yes, it looks like it could be a really good space, I think. We hope. So, yeah, definitely want to think about for the future. They're an interesting crew to negotiate with. They were quite slow, I'll say. They took a while to get back to us about stuff, but you know, and one thing I will note is the thing about Heathrow, for example, they really want us to come back, whereas the Brighton guys were like a bit sort of, well, if you're there, you're there. If you're not, you're not. We don't really seem to care. Whereas Heathrow are like, you're coming, fantastic. We're going to do this, this, and this, and can we? They keep offering us different things, so they're really enthusiastic to have us, so, which makes a difference, and it makes life easier, I think. So yeah, just as an observation.
If you've got a hotel that's willing to work with you, it makes a big difference not having to fight them.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, people tell stories about the 1987 Worldcon in the Brighton Hilton, and there were. I wasn't there; it was before my time, but I understand it was a very, very difficult hotel to work with, where the hotel manager actively hated the convention, which is less than optimal.
Hotels like that.
Yeah.
Manager really did hate. I was there. It was my first convention, and remember that we all went to look at the fireworks, which were lovely. Then they wouldn't let us back into the hotel, even if you were a guest in the hotel.
Jesus.
Too many people coming in at once, until it was pointed out that, see that room over there, where we're about to have our disco or whatever it was we're having at the time? Yeah. Why don't you just open that and let everybody in there?
Good Lord.
I suppose so.
Yeah, I can well believe it.
I was in a hotel, so not on this side of the pond, so one of the conventions that I was involved in running in the States, where they disliked us so much that on the Saturday night they were trying to say, we're going to cancel everybody's rooms and you need to go. They really didn't. Although we tried to explain what a science fiction convention was and what was going to be going on, they were really unhappy with people in costumes running around. And in this particular one, there were a lot of goth people, and they were just, nope, we're not having this. It was fun.
Extraordinary.
We have another question. Mr. Cooper. The Steve Cooper, not the other one. Have we, con runners, old, that we stop thinking about non-hotel options? We want a nice hotel. We want our creature comforts. And I'm not afraid to say, yeah.
Well, I think that we have in a way, but because people want to be able to just get in the lift or go up the stairs to their room when they're done sitting in the Real Ale bar, you know, having a fair few pints, and that's understandable. But also, I think, as Bill was pointing out earlier, a lot of the spaces that are not hotel spaces are a bit too big for an Eastercon. We don't need all of the space of a convention center, and having to pay the price of. So the other thing is, then you're paying for your function space as well as all the rooms that you're going to have in the hotel. Whereas in the hotels, quite often, your function space comes free if you fill enough room nights.
Mm.
So I think that that's a consideration. Yeah, I get it, Steve.
I would say that it's quite a complicated situation. I'm a member of. I know in Eastern Europe they've got lots of different patterns and some media conventions and stuff. But I'm a member of a husky group based in the Northwest. And what they like to do once a year is everybody goes to a camping and caravan site with their huskies, and the weather is awful, but everybody in their huskies has a great time. And I was just thinking, can you imagine trying to get fandom onto a camping site in April? It's not going to work. So again, the restriction here is I'm not in any way saying it's artificial or unreal. It's because the sort of people that we want to go to our Eastercons are not the sort of people who want to go camping in March. Bless them.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are entirely reasonable.
Have any of the panel looked at things like holiday camps?
We didn't.
Okay, can I tell my horror story, which also involves the Brighton Metropole, by the way. I was on the committee of the 1996 Eastercon Evolution, and we were originally going to be in the Brighton Metropole. In fact, our tagline was "Right, Fred's dead. Let's move on." You know, it was terrible. It was the 90s. We found that, in fact, the hotel manager's influence on the hotel was such that even a decade later, they weren't interested in working with the science fiction convention. We found this out after we'd won the bid. So I had spent about 6 months charging around the country, and we looked at a lot of different options. And because I was pretty much brand new in fandom and didn't know what to do, I'd take this option back and talk to people like, oh, I don't know, Tim Illingworth or Caroline Mullen, or maybe you, and say, what do you think of this option? And they'd go, you really want to do what? And eventually it kind of came very clear that, you know, with minor exceptions, like maybe Harrogate Convention Centre, it was going to be a hotel or nothing. So, you know, again, I've never really tried exploring much beyond those criteria. You know, there's no point setting up a lovely convention at a university if everybody is going to complain about, so you want me to stay in a dorm with 8 other people with a shared toilet and kitchen?
What? But I also think maybe it's about your demographic, because if we think about Sci-Fi Weekender, which is an event that goes on every year, and they go out to a holiday camp, basically out in Wales generally, where they all have, there's a bunch of little holiday cottages, and they're staying. So groups are staying in some of the bigger cottages, and you know, you can get a single cottage if you want, but it's all about being out there in this wilderness, and they're having a great time, and they seem to be making some money because it's going every year.
And Eurocons, people go stay in hostels. When I went to one of the Worldcons in Glasgow, I stayed in a student accommodation in a big tower block on the other side of the city. You know, but this is all irrelevant. We know what an Eastercon is and what it looks like and what our memberships want, and you know, if you're going to come up with something a bit out of the ordinary, it better work in the other ways that are necessary, you know, for social space and communication and adventure and excitement.
I agree. I mean, it's not just, you know, that there have to be mushrooms at breakfast. Oh
God,
sorry,
mushrooms at breakfast.
Obligatory.
I once ran an Eastercon where there were no mushrooms for breakfast.
You're still alive? I'm impressed.
I was younger then.
I once helped to run an Eastercon where there were mushrooms for breakfast, but only for the committee.
I wasn't involved with that. But yes, I do remember that, Alice. Yes, I do remember.
Yeah.
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, coming up with alternatives, as people have just suggested. And even sort of selling it to the membership is quite difficult sometimes when you're doing something that's a bit different. So, but it's all about managing expectations, isn't it? As you say, getting people to go camping in March, I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think any of us could persuade a wider membership to do something like that. There might be a few individuals who go, "Yeah, that's a great idea," and everyone else is like, "Are you joking?"
And then there's also the thing about 10% of fandom will hate anything and anywhere, you know. It's almost a cliche. I will tell you, I'm not madly keen on a couple of hotels which might possibly be included in. But on the other hand, I go to an Eastercon for the fun and to meet people, and as long as I have a place to sleep, I don't hugely care about long corridors or, you know.
I mean, there's one UK fan who I won't name, who is famous for always complaining about the venue. They always do this every year. And they managed to complain about our venue before we'd actually announced it, which we thought was quite an achievement. how it was. Oh right, they've complained already. They don't even know where we're going yet, but they've managed to complain about it. Achievement unlocked. It's very difficult not to be cynical about such things, which is slightly unfair on said individual. But yeah.
I think that okay, so imagine that you ran an Eastercon without a real ale bar, and there's been at least one that didn't. Then you've got to accept that there are going to be people for whom you've kind of ruined or devalued their weekend a bit. It's part of what people spend quite a lot of money in going to an Eastercon between their membership and hotel bills and transport and stuff. For some people, it might be their only holiday, so you've got to take that into account.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
While all these things are sometimes extremely challenging to deal with, it doesn't mean that they're not important.
That's true. So if we go back to how the pandemic has, for me, I was just sitting here thinking about how the pandemic has affected our search for hotels. And I think one of the things is not necessarily the search, but the way that we've always dealt with hotels. So for room nights and function space and guaranteeing this many room nights and all the ways we've dealt. With the advent of hybrid type events and possibly knowing that part of your membership is going to be online and part of your membership is going to be at the hotel, then our ways of negotiating will need to change. And I think that that's going to be something that we're going to run into in the future. And I think that's something that the pandemic is going to that's one way it will have affected us, because I don't think we can, I have a contract right now, which is guaranteeing hotel nights, but I have a really good relationship with the hotel and I know that they'll work with us. But I think going forward, if I was going to be going into a contract, I would be having to think hard about how many room nights can I actually guarantee in order to guarantee that function space. And I think we're going to need to think of new ways of working with hotels.
Yeah,
my experience. Sorry, Phil.
One of the problems we have right now is absolute uncertainty about numbers, because we don't know how many people we're going to get for obvious reasons. Anecdotally, a lot of people have told us, I don't know if I'm going to come yet because it's just the sheer uncertainty. As it is, our current numbers aren't great, which we expect. Current projections look like we'll be running an Eastercon roughly half the size that Eterbium was. That's based on current numbers. I suspect we will get more, but which is a huge challenge all by itself. So I think it will be a smaller Eastercon next year, assuming we're able to do something in person. Obviously, if we have to go virtual, we have to go virtual, and that's a whole different can of worms. But that's where we are right now, which is a worry.
My experience of negotiation post-pandemic as to pre-pandemic was generally with hotels. Hotel managers, negotiators tend to be the sort of people who would think inside the box. We've got these function spaces, we've got these rooms, this way we want them to be used. But we'll talk about price if you bring me in a deal. And you might persuade them, look, you can stick a real ale bar there, and that would be about the size of it. Post-pandemic, and I feel that I've been more post-pandemic than either of you two, they're more willing to think outside the box. You turn up and you say, I'll hold an event for 3,500 people, but only 800 of them will be on site. They go, great, sounds like a wonderful idea. But they're much less willing to negotiate around prices because they're so desperate financially. So in a sense, it's kind of like before and after the apocalypse, completely different assumptions and ways of working.
Yeah, there's a lot in that, I think. Be interesting to see how you guys get on, actually. What was I going to say?
James has asked a really good question. Has a lack of real ale really prevented Eastercon booking a hotel? Is real ale the hill to die on? Does it matter to younger fans? Generally, despite being a real ale drinker, I find myself in agreement with James on this. It's not a great hill to die on. I picked it as an analogy about the sort of that the requirements we're looking for are not ones that were invented. They're kind of things that our membership are saying that they want. Our existing membership, rather than how it might change over time. I could very well see over time real ale bars vanishing, just like masquerades have. People lost interest in them.
Do you think?
I'm perfectly happy with a good can or bottle of beer. I don't need real ale, but I'll probably be shot for that now.
I think giving people some choices ale-wise is always a good thing. But
Sorry, Phil?
hotel beers are notoriously expensive and rubbish. So giving people some decent alternatives is always a good idea.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a statement somebody made, if we looked for hotels with next to a campsite or possibly a caravan park, would actually encourage younger people?
I don't know that the campsite or the caravan park would encourage them unless they wanted to go out and sit in a camp circle all night. But I think that I saw another comment come through there on the chat saying that, do we need younger people helping to look for younger set of eyes looking at hotel requirements and what hotels? And I think absolutely we do.
Yeah.
And this all goes back to, we need younger people coming in full stop and helping with everything. And I think getting younger people in on the search for hotels is a great idea.
I mean, I don't know if this is a perennial problem about about aging demographics in fandom, and I mean, was this conversation happening 30 years ago? I don't know. I'd be interested to think about it. But one thing I do notice is that at Eastercon, I'm one of the youngest people there. Those of you who remember Nine Worlds, I was one of the oldest people at Nine Worlds, which I thought was a fascinating contrast. So the fans are out there, the younger fans are out there. It's just getting them to come to Eastercon is difficult. And I don't know how we do that.
That has definitely changed. When I went to our first convention in '93, I was 36 or something. I was one of the older new fans and kind of in the middle of the age ranges. You know, all the people who now run conventions are still my friends and are all about the same age as me. So I think there's definitely, we have definitely got older, but there are still younger people around as well.
Yeah, the problem is trying to get young people in to. I think there's a lot of young people look at things like Eastercons and all the other cons thinking, yeah, these older people are going to run it forever. Mm. And I can go and enjoy myself. Mm-hmm. You know, that's not the case. If young people don't come and help to run conventions with the new ideas, we'll be having this, well, we won't be.
Exactly.
We'll be dead.
Yeah. But and the thing is, we need that. It's not something that you just jump into and know how to do. So we need to start bringing them in at the level of, come help us find a hotel, come help us run program, come help us chair, come help us do logistics, come help us do all of these things, and come in at a committee level being mentored. So basically maybe a senior and junior committee. I don't really know exactly how that needs to be, but I've been thinking a lot about it because that's one of my thing I worry about. You, and when you go to the conventions and you look around, you're thinking, this is gonna go right into the sunset if we don't start really actively trying to do something about it. And I think looking at hotels, so that comment that was made, I think bringing them in, trying to get younger people in to the search for hotels and looking with fresh eyes at how things might be able to work would be a great idea.
I mean, going back to James's comment about real ale and my use of real ale as one of the examples of the criteria that our membership have put around us, is that kind of forcing us or encouraging us to focus on a particular part of our demographic rather than remember how painful it was and how much fuss there was to even get something as simple as a creche organized. I mean, it's become something we do now. We provide a creche and as part of what we do for our membership. But there was about a decade when we were arguing about it and people had to organize their own creches.
But then again, creche is another issue. To run a creche now, it runs in the neighborhood of 4,000, between 4,000, 4,500 pounds for the weekend.
Yeah,
that's quite expensive.
Yeah.
That's a big chunk of budget.
Imagine if you had to choose between the real ale bar and the creche, which would you choose? That's a good question.
Well, that all comes down to numbers, doesn't it? If you're not going to pay out that money on a creche if you've got 5 kids in there for the weekend.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you about it's a numbers thing, but it's also about if you want younger people to come and bring their families and get involved, then you've got to make sure then the crash suddenly becomes a really important thing. And in fact, if I'm not saying this is a real thing, but if I had to choose between a crash and a real ale bar, I'd choose the crash and the heartbeat, you know, because people can always drink bottles, cans, smuggle it in, go to the local pub or whatever. But, you know, not having a crash means that anybody with a child is pretty much excluded from the convention completely. So,
I mean, it's certainly one of the barriers to even attending the convention, let alone helping run it. It's part of a wider thing about, you know, what other barriers are there. One of them is cost.
Yeah, Catherine's mentioned that.
As Kat has just said in the chat. I mean, one way you can partly alleviate that is running things like bursary schemes. I mean, we just announced our bursary scheme, for example, and that helps. It's not a complete solution, obviously, but it certainly goes some way to alleviating that problem. I mean, a wider bursary scheme would be great, but we just don't have the money.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's what these things boil down to, isn't it? So we'd love to do that. We just can't afford it. We do not have the money.
I mean, this is another one of the challenges, and we talked a bit. I talked at the beginning about how our choice of sites was limited by what we do. I mean, for myself and Julie, an Eastercon is basically £1,000 expense, and there's really no way around that. And that's not even counting put the dog in kennels and other incidentals. It's a lot of money. Finding ways in which we can, if we want people with less money involved in conventions, then we have to find relatively low barrier ways to achieve that, you know?
Yeah. One of the comments made, which is quite interesting on numbers, is 5 children in a creche could enable 10 plus adults to attend, which is a good point. But we seem to have strayed from problems getting hotels to problems with barriers to attending the convention itself, which is a problem for me. Don't know how you guys feel, but
It's
that's
fine,
our memories are long. Has anyone talked to the Northwestern Hotel that dare not speak its name?
He must mean the Norbreck, mustn't he?
Oh, the Norbreck, yes.
Honestly, Steve, I live in Lancaster. I know where the Norbreck is. I could almost throw a rock and hit it. That's probably the best thing you could do with it. It's got a terrible reputation. It turns up in the local news all the time. Oh, the Adelphi. Oh, right. Oh, no, Liverpool. Liverpool is in the south, you know.
We didn't talk to the Adelphi. Essentially, because anytime we mention the name, it really is the Voldemort of con running hotels. Everyone's just like, no, we're not going there.
I was really like the Adelphi, but again, I can't imagine trying to present a bid where we were going to the Adelphi again.
It has its issues. I've never been there. I'm told it's a fantastic space. Or should be.
As long as you took nothing of any value that you didn't keep on your person, it was
precisely
fantastic.
the issue. Actually, there's another issue with it, is that it's run by the Britannia Group, who are consistently voted the worst hotel management group in the country.
But
and it's falling apart.
The hotel in Buxton was a Britannia hotel as well, so that's not necessarily the kiss of doom it used to be.
Fair enough. But the Adelphi is apparently it's in terrible material condition, I'm told. They've been skimping on their maintenance, to put it mildly, such that the place is basically falling apart.
So, is another problem with finding hotel is the fact that fans have long memories?
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely.
I mean, sometimes there's good reasons for saying don't go to a place. So the Adelphi, okay, we can't sell that. And there's good reasons for that. And the problems that were there have not been solved. Those problems are still extant. Anecdotally, people who stay there even recently still have the same problems that fans did. Was it 2007 the last time a convention was there? I'm trying to remember.
Sounds about right.
Something like that.
I mean, in the course of this conversation, we've talked about the Brighton Metropole and events that happened there 50 years ago, you know?
Yeah. I mean, when we were first talking to them, a number of people said to us, "Oh God, that place," and listed all the problems from '87 and so on and so forth, and more recent difficulties with access. So when World Fantasy was there, was it 7 or 8 years ago? There were a lot of difficulties around access, and people were very keen to point that out to us and say, have they solved those problems?
But you see, Phil, when you were talking about I don't think you ever actually publicly said we're going to the Brighton Metropole, but I think it was an open secret for some time. You did quite a good job of presenting it and selling it and saying this is how we'd use it, and you know that in a sense you're working on changing the memory to the extent that I think quite a few people were disappointed when it fell through. So
yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's about managing expectations, and we were very careful to address people's concerns about it, because when somebody says, have they fixed the main entrance such that we can get a wheelchair in there, have they solved that problem? And in fact, they have in that specific question. So it's not great for access, as I said, but it's better than it has been. So
That's
yeah, there was one venue we looked at, and there was an access problem such that we couldn't run a convention there. They had one lift, and it was a very, very small lift which could hold 3 people, but they had to be very close friends.
Ooh, let's not talk about lifts, please.
Sorry,
I'm still smarting from. Let's not talk about lifts. No, a hotel never has enough lifts, especially if it is 22 floors.
Yeah, I take your point, mate.
One of the things
and
I've
then
also
the lifts break.
Yeah, one of the things I also think about is transport. About where a hotel is. There's it's kind of an add-on to a hotel in the middle of nowhere with nothing around it. That no overflow hotels, but yeah,
I agree. I mean, having cheap alternatives as overflow hotels is on that borderline between essential and desirable, isn't it? So I mean, Heathrow is quite good for stuff like that. Indeed, so was Brighton.
the problem with
Right,
it.
but so we were just mentioning access for Brighton, and one of the places that I think we fall down, and I have vested interest, I will admit, in this, in looking at hotels, we look at the hotel for the act. What we fail to look at is how is that, so when we're also looking for the vast majority of the membership to make sure that there are things around, good restaurants, things like that they can go to and not be locked into the hotel, we don't look at how that works for the person with access needs. For instance, a hotel that's up on a sharp rise, that's going to lock in a wheelchair person being at the top of that hill. And then even if they were going to go down because somebody said, oh, well, I'll help you, you get down and you find out that most of the restaurants and things to do in town have steps in or steps down, things are downstairs or upstairs. So all of those things that all the amenities that everybody else gets to go to aren't open. And I think that's something that we probably need to do a little better.
That's absolutely not 2024. I will go on record now as saying that, as the first person, pretty much the first person we appointed after the chairs was an access person. I will go on record now as saying it will be much better for access than most other places we've used. I mean, access in all terms of it.
Right. And so that's good, Phil. And I know, Pat, that you guys said that you had this person, and I thought that's really a good thing, because that is somewhere that I think we've all fallen down on when we were looking at hotels. We're only looking at the hotel space, and we're not considering the surrounds.
I agree completely. As I get older and have my own access needs, I just think, oh my God, how terrible I have been in the past. Well, I can't change the past. I can do something about what we do in the future,
Exactly.
No, I completely agree.
So, Vanessa, what you're saying is that not just look at the hotel, but make sure that fronts and things are accessible.
That the amenities around. So, when we're providing all these amenities where people can go out to have dinners, arrange dinners and everything, except for the people with mobility issues or other issues, sensory issues, whatever, are sitting there going, well, I can't be included in that because that won't actually work for me. So I'll just sit here, and my only option for meals is in the hotel. That's 4 days in a hotel, you've pretty much sampled everything that you really think is interesting on the menu more than once.
Yeah, and then again, you're looking at what do you prioritize or what? We've chosen to prioritize access over other things, but and I think we've got a site where we're going to have access and a creche and a real bar. But if it had to make choices between those, what would we have chosen and in what order? Yeah, I promise you, access would have been number one on that list. But yes. Have access to the prime criteria to drop the real ale and mushrooms. Couldn't agree more.
Agreed.
Yep.
Yeah, completely.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, I once ran an exercise at a con runner, I think, asking people a list of things, what was important to them as a person. You ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers. So it's
Absolutely.
quite a juggling act for committees these days.
Three fans, 5 opinions.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting
Exactly.
it.
Yes,
I agree.
absolutely. Do we have any other questions? And can you put a cue before it so I know it's a question, not just a bit of a chat? So,
Are we way over time?
no, I don't think
No,
so.
not at all. That's fine.
9:30 to 10:30?
Hang on, there's some chats in the there's some
And
might be
10
some
to 11,
questions in
yeah,
the
got it.
Discord as
Until
well.
11.
You've not had enough coffee yet, Vanessa, have you?
No, I haven't.
What is this enough coffee of which you speak?
I know, exactly. I'm not sure what that amount is, but
Okay, there's a
reached
few
it.
comments in the Discord as well, but they've mostly ended up in the chat.
Yeah.
But Martin is saying that price barriers are pretty real for the prices of conventions are very high, and this is a real barrier as well. So,
Yeah.
you know, I kind of think of this as an envelope. You know, you want to try and get in this inside this price envelope. You've got to make sure it's affordable by keeping the price down. You've got to make sure that there are a bunch of things you want to do, some of which are quite expensive. You've got to make sure that the site is safe and usable. And you know, it's quite a difficult price envelope, quite a difficult place to make a landing. And I think all three of us, in fact, anybody who's tried to find an Eastercon hotel over the past decade has struggled, not because there's lack of sites, but because that landing spot is so small, you know.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think, if there's a message I wanted to give to the rest of fandom, you need to make that landing spot a bit bigger, be a bit more willing to be flexible. You know, if we turn around and say we've got this lovely site, but we can't get a real ale bar, don't lynch the committee.
Right. Question: are hotel and event spaces more accepting of science fiction conventions these days as SFF, excuse me, I've not had any coffee either, has gone a bit more media mainstream, and does that make them easier to deal with? Personally, no.
It's interesting. I mean, I've only been running, been involved in con running for only about 6 or 7 years, so I couldn't tell you what it was like, say, 30 years ago. I don't know. I've got no frame of reference there. So
Weirdos being
depends
down
on. I think it
Glasgow.
depends on if they've hosted a science fiction convention before and had a good experience.
Yeah.
And especially if it's a chain hotel. So if you go to like a Hilton or a Marriott or something like that, and then they feed back, if they had a great experience and you worked well with the hotel, then they can feed back to their other partner hotels that yes, this is a good group. But I think it really all depends on whether or not it's been a group that hasn't come in and trashed the hotel and broken the lifts and done all of that type of thing.
Well,
I think when you go to a hotel with science fiction, be Eastercon, it's getting through to them that it's not a whole bunch of people will come in, have breakfast, go and look at the same program item or display or whatever, out and have lunch. It doesn't work like that for us, and that takes an awful lot of getting through to hotels, I've found.
yeah, that's a huge challenge. I mean, with Heathrow, obviously we're quite lucky because we've been there before. They know us. They really want us to come back, obviously, because we'll make them money, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But yeah, as you say, getting that message across is incredibly difficult to people who don't know us.
Yeah.
Well, to some extent, it's the hotel experience. I mean, you will run across hotels where they're used to sports clubs or bridge groups, and they know those patterns of behavior. Well, you know, a bridge group will play all morning, break for lunch, play all afternoon, break for lunch, have a beer, and all go to bed by night. Sorry, I'm exaggerating, but they're not late night stayer uppers. But if it's the sort of hotel or site which has had gaming events or LARPing or comics or other science fiction conventions, and that's where, as this sort of stuff becomes more common and more widespread, you run across hotels and what have you with that experience more often, you know. And you can say we're like gamers, sort of thing, except maybe a bit older on average.
Yeah, I mean,
Favorite, sorry, Phil,
Go.
carry on.
Very quickly, it's the famous phrase, isn't it? Someone says in various places, you drink like rugby players and fight like chess players. In terms of behaviour, in other words, we drink an awful lot.
I gotta tell you, I am absolutely certain every hotel manager who I've ever said that to heard it the other way around and then had to think about it.
Yep.
So,
Just what I was about to say.
On my list of phrases to avoid.
And we did it again with the Buxton Hotel, where they kept saying, "You lot drink like anything, but you're all so nice."
Yeah.
You know, even down to the girl that was phoning around for details. Everybody phoned has been so nice. You think, well, what kind of experience have you had that you've been polite on a phone? So remember, when you go to a hotel, be nice to the staff, because they don't always get people being nice to them.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a given. You'd hope. I mean, we have codes of conduct for a reason. Indeed, that's one of them. I find it very difficult to conceive of being rude to hotel staff, but some people do, sadly. And it's important that we police that, absolutely, because that's just not acceptable. Absolutely unacceptable.
I think we'll do a round of last statements then, because it's getting to that time. So shall we go backwards and start with Pat?
Oh God. Okay. What am I going to talk about? I think that I think searching for the right sort of hotels and the right sort of site and the right sort of event has always been difficult. And this is why we've so often tended to use the same site over and over and over again. You know, basically we went back to Delphi almost as long as they'd take us. We might have got one more go out of them, and the Radisson Edwardian the same. We went back there almost as often as they would take us, and now we're doing the same with the Park Inn. We do this because it's very much easier to find sites. So it's always been difficult. The things that make it difficult are that we're a group of 1,000 or so, mostly friends with evolving needs. And as those needs evolve, then what we as their committee are trying to do is organize something that matches the new needs or the updated needs, about access, about creche, about, you know, real ale bars, about there are a lot more vegetarians and vegans around than there used to be, those sorts of things. So yeah, it's always been difficult. It probably always will be.
Vanessa?
I think I would agree. And I think that, which is why, for me, you know, I go back to hotels I know I have good relationships with, because you can negotiate with them because they know who you are and they know what to expect. But I do think that going forward, we are going to run into more interesting times when we're negotiating for price with hotels. And I think that's something that the pandemic is going to bring in, because we no longer have the certainty of our membership being there and all being under the same roof and wanting to be under the same roof, which we've had in the past.
Bill?
I think, so the current model of how we run an Eastercon, obviously it evolves and changes, but I think that at some point over the next 10 years, we may have to radically rethink how we do these things. I think we might just run into a brick wall of we will not be able to do this the way we've always done it. That's a very real possibility, and I think the sooner we start thinking of more radical solutions, the better. I don't know, Pat and Farah, for example, have been had some radical thoughts about how that model might evolve or change. And I think we need to be open to the possibility that these things will have to change. They may have to change. It's not a question of we'll be doing it differently because we want to. It's because we have to. And I think that's something we're going to have to confront over the next few years, which is slightly depressing. On a more cheerful note, please come to Eastercon next year. It will be really, really good to see you all in person. Memberships are available.
I'm really looking forward to the next couple of Eastercons. The one after, not so much.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
You'll be fine, Pat. So I think in conclusion, we're saying it's always been difficult to find hotels. That pandemic has made that worse, but possibly not as worse as we think. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah.
Ask me at the dead dog next Easter, assuming we're able to have one.
so we need to be aware that things need to change, and our membership needs to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And we need younger people in to help us look at things differently, maybe.
And flexibility is key.
Yeah,
We need to be flexible.
Yes. And I think, thank you for the questions. If there's no other questions, I think we're just about done.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add is try never to do panels with a hangover. So thank you very much, Caroline.
Okie dokie.
Good advice.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm turning the recording off now. So, hello.
Thank you,
All right.
Caroline.
Thanks a lot.